Okay, gentlemen, this is a little exercise to help you with the graphing display calculator. We're going to take the information that you can see here on the split screen, the 2.4 day 2, which is just GDC practice, really. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that information. We're going to create a scatter plot, which we've done a couple of times already. And then with that scatter plot, we're going to create a line of best fit with the graphing display calculator. It does get a little confusing, but I believe it was page 535 in your textbook. That'll walk you through how to do this properly. Now, some of you will have a different version of a calculator, so that might be a little bit different. When we get to that point where some of the calculators models differentiate, I'll try and explain to you what to do there, okay? So let's first start by going to our stat menu because we're going to enter some statistics, right? Actually, that's not true. Let's look at the question first. The question says, identify the independent variable, dependent variable. Okay, this shows the number of days absent from math class and the marks for 15 students. You would assume that the more days you're absent from math, the lower your mark's going to be. Okay, so the number of days of absent, notice these numbers are not in order, just random data. Okay, so this person was absent 2 days, their mark is 82. This person was never absent, they got a 75. This person was absent 10 days, they failed. Absent 6, 62, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see what's going on. This person was only absent a day, they got 84. So the independent variable, remember, first column is likely the x-axis, right? So the number of days you're absent doesn't depend on your math mark. We would never look at your math mark and say, oh, you have 82, you must have been absent 2 days. That makes no sense. But you could look at the math mark depending on how many days you're absent. Okay, you could say, oh, you missed this many days, your math mark might be lower. So that makes more logical sense or common sense. So the x value or the independent variable is the number of days absent. The dependent is the mark. Your mark depends on how many days you're absent, or the positive way of looking at that is how many days you're present. Okay, so then it says make a scatter plot of the data. Describe the relationship between a student's marks and attendance. And it says, why is it not reasonable to draw a line of best fit? Explain, are there any outliers? Explain. And then it says, use your GDC to determine the equation of the line of best fit. So it actually wants us to, although line of best fit is probably not the most ideal, it wants us to practice using our GDC to actually create a line of best fit. Now, I do have answers down here, so I'm going to cheat a little bit. If you can go ahead and graph this data, you should get something that looks a little bit like this. Okay, remember, it's always important or necessary, I should say, to have a title, okay, and you label everything properly. This is very important because you want to know, and the reader of your data or your chart, graph, etc., wants to know what you graphed on which axis. So now I need to know that days absence on the x-axis and that marks, your math marks are on the y-axis. Okay, so make sure you have your labels appropriately. Remember, you're trying to extend the full length as much as possible of your axes so you can spread out the data and see if there's a trend. All right, so what I want to call your attention to is this bolded number F here, or letter F, sorry. Use your GDC to determine the equation line of best fit. And then it says here, set your float to 2. What in the world does that mean? Setting your float to 2 means that whenever you enter information in the calculator, it's going to round to 2 decimal places automatically. So we want to all do the exact same thing and have the exact same equation. Okay, no one's going to be off by 0.01 or 0.02. We'll have the exact same answers. So the way you do that is look at your GDC and there's a mode button right next to the second function. So select the mode button there. And the second word down says float. See the normals flashing? I'm going to use my arrow keys, go to float. I'm going to tab over to the number 2 next to the word float. I'm going to hit enter. And now that 2 is highlighted. So I have just set my float to 2. Everything will round to 2 decimal places. Now, let's say you're going to science class or physics class, whatever it is, and you're not supposed to have this float. Or we're doing trigonometry in grade 10 and we want it set to 4. Whatever the reason is. If you wanted to remove the float, what you would do is just use your arrow keys, go back to the word float and hit enter. Notice how it's gone now. So by hitting enter on the word float, you just eliminate it. But if you want a float or an automatic rounding, oops, that's not what I wanted, go to 2. So set your float to 2 by going again to 2 and hit enter. So we want that. Then we're going to enter this data under the stat menu, so that because it is statistics. You might recall stat, edit, Now, because I'm using this online version, I have no information there, but you might have information from the last time you use your GDC. If it's literally from the last question, the last day, you're gonna have information in about 5 columns. If you're deleting information from a column, okay, one thing you could do is you could reset your calculator before you begin doing an assignment or a test, or you could go up to the top heading here. See how I've moved my cursor to L1? You can hit clear, and hit the clear button, and then the down arrow, and it will clear everything out. Okay, make sure you do that. Sometimes if you go on to L2 or the topic or the heading, and you hit clear first by accident, you've actually cleared out that title. Then you're gonna have to reset your calculator to get that back. So sometimes you actually could delete the L1, it's gone, or L2 and it's gone. It just goes from L1 to L3, like what just happened. It's because you made a little boo-boo, you deleted the heading. Okay, so make sure that you go on to the heading. If you're trying to clear out a column, go to the heading, hit clear, and then enter, and that or clear and the down arrow. Either one of those will work. Okay, so mine's already cleared out, obviously. I want to use my arrow keys. I'm going to get here to the first column, and I'm going to enter everything I have. So notice when I hit 2, enter, or 0, enter, it's automatically putting 2 decimal places there. Okay, that's what you want to do. I'm going to pause the video. You enter everything, number of days absent in column 1, and then the math marks in column 2. So I'll pause the video, you do that. All right, so all my data is entered, so should yours should also be entered. And remember, you're double checking to make sure that everything lines up accordingly. We don't want to have too much in the L1 and too little in L2 or vice versa. We want to make sure we line up. Double check your numbers now as well, because you need to make sure that you've got the information entered. If you did a little keying error, you're going to get a different equation at the end of the day. So we've got the information entered. And if we wanted to make a scatter plot of this data, we would just hit right now we hit graph, for example, right? Graph, nothing there. Why is there nothing there? Because remember, you have to tell the calculator, I want to use the stat plot function. Now, some of you might actually have something if your stat plot's on. If you reset your calculator, your stat plot is automatically off. That feature of taking that data and putting it into a scatter plot is not turned on yet. How do you turn that on? It's the second function of the y equal button right there. So hit second function y equal just to double check. Mine is off. So I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to hit enter again on the word on. So now my stat plot is on. What you also want to make sure is, if you've used this for the last assignment that we did, you might remember we changed XList1 to L3, I think, or L4 and L5. So you might need to tab down here and make sure that's L1 and L2, because we only have list 1 and list 2. How do you change that to L1? Just at that area at XList, you need to hit the second function of the number 1, and that'll change it to L1 if it's not. And same thing for L2, tab down. If it doesn't say L2 there, you'd hit second function and the number 2 button, it changes it to L2 and you're good to go. Otherwise, your calculator is going to still try and graph column 4 and 5, and there's nothing there because we just cleared everything out. So keep that in mind. All right, so if you hit the graph button, you might see something there, but likely not. And then what we're going to do here, why don't I see anything? Because my window is +10, -10 on the Y, and +10, -10 on the X, so I don't see anything there. And if you look at the value in the grid or the chart given to us, when the number of days absent is 2, the math mark is 82. So when X is 2, Y is 82. We don't even see that on the grid because we go as high as 10. So how do we do that? You might remember, you go to zoom, the zoom button right top middle, and zoom 9. Okay, so hit number 9 on the calculator, and there we go, we see our data. Okay, now it doesn't look 100% like a linear relationship like we've seen in other assignments where the dots are a little more tightly knit. It does look like there's definitely a trend that the more days, if you read the graph, as you read it left to right, the more days absent, the marks tend to be going down. But does it look like a true linear relationship? It's not as good as we want it to be. So that's why it said here on option D, it said, why is it not reasonable to draw a line of best fit? Okay. Right there in D, it said, why is it not reasonable? And the reason is because it's not really the greatest, it's not the strongest correlation that we want to see. But nevertheless, are there any outliers? It kind of does look like there's an outlier. The very first dot right over here looks like an outlier to me. Doesn't fit the trend. This person missed very little days, right? Because x-axis is number of days absent. They missed maybe a day or so, and their mark is low. So they've been present a lot and their mark is still low. What happened? Again, I don't know. Maybe they studied the wrong material. Maybe something else happened that morning, had a bad day, whatever it is, forgot that there was a second page of the math test and left it blank. That happens, right? So we don't know what it is, but it's an outlier. Doesn't make sense. This person is attending classes very frequently and still didn't get a good mark. No big deal. All right, so now we're going to use our GDC to determine the equation of the line of best fit, and we're all going to get the same answer. So you're used to doing the scatter plot now, hopefully, and here's where it gets wonky. It's a little bit weird, but when you get a line of best fit, it's also called a linear regression, just fancy schmancy math language for line of best fit. We're going to calculate a linear regression. Instead of drawing the line, like you'll see I drew here below it, instead of drawing that pink line, I'm going to let the calculator do that because it's better than I am. And when you do that, you want to be able to interpolate, extrapolate using the GDC. But in order to do so, you have to store the equation for that line in the calculator. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to find the equation and store it so that we can find out more information using interpolation and extrapolation. All right, so hit the stat button again on your calculator. This is described in the textbook as well. So hit the stat menu. And then you want to tab over, see it says edit calc tests. Well, we already edited and we already entered information. We want to tab over to the right to the calc menu. So you went to stat, edit, and stat, I apologize, let me start again. Stat, tab over to the right to the calc menu and calculate. Option 4 says linreg. That's the linear regression or line of best fit. So we're going to hit number 4 in the calculator, or you can tab down to 4 and hit enter, up to you. And then it says X list 1, X list 2. Now, some of you might have the TI-83 calculator. If you have that calculator, it's a little bit different. It looks like this. There you go. You can't see it because I've got the screen sharing thing on, but nevertheless, will it show up? Maybe, maybe not. Anyway, you've got a different calculator on you. And your screen will not show what we see on the screen here. So the newer version of these calculators automatically assumes that you want to use whatever's in list 1 as your X values and whatever's in list 2 as your Y values. If you have a different screen, it's important for you to careful, don't touch anything else right now. But so for those of you who have this screen, leave it alone. Don't touch your calculator. But those who have the different screen, which is probably blank, what you need to type in is L1 comma L2 comma. And how you do that is you use your calculator, you hit second function and the number 1 button. Okay, only the people who have a different calculator screen. Hit second function and the number 1 button, and L1 should show up on your calculator. Then you're going to type in this right here. You'll see on your calculator above the number 7, there's a comma button. Just hit the comma button. Okay, so now it should say L1 comma. Then you're going to hit second function again of the number 2. That will pop up L2. So now on your screen, it says L1 comma L2. You're going to have to hit comma again. So above the number 7 there, hit that comma button. So now it says L1 comma L2 comma. So you've just told the calculator that you're using list 1 and list 2. Don't hit anything else yet. Now, everybody else who has the screen that you see in the video here, I want you to use your arrow keys to tab down to store reg equation there. Okay, that's where you want your cursor. Okay. Now, regardless of which calculator have, the guys who we just did L1, L2, L1 comma L2 comma, and the guys that have, or the people that have this this calculator screen, we're all going to do what I'm about to tell you now. So regardless of which calculator you have, we're all going to select the VARS button right here. Okay, so go ahead, everybody hit the VARS button now. And then you're going to tab over to the right to where it says Y vars or Y variables. Tab over to the right. Okay, option 1 says function. So select option 1 by hitting enter or the number 1, and then it says function. Now you can store many equations here. It's asking you, do you want to store this here, number 2, number 3? Well, there's nothing there. So we're going to store it as number 1 by hitting enter or selecting number 1. It takes us back to this screen. The guys with the other calculator, I believe you're just going to have to hit enter. Guys with this one, you have to tab down to the word calculate and then hit enter. But the guys with the other one, you just hit enter once or twice. And we should all eventually get to this. Okay, this is telling you that the format of the equation is y equal ax plus b. Okay, I'm going to write that over here if I can, if it lets me. Y equal ax plus b. But it's telling you that a is actually negative 2.18. So you're going to write y equal negative 2.18. And then you're going to write the x right after it, the way it has it there, plus b. Now, I just got to make sure B is positive 78.75. So we're going to write plus. But if it were negative, we'd have to write a minus there, or a negative symbol, plus 78.75. That is the equation. Okay. Now, if you go to the graph option, check this out. Hit graph, and that line will show up. You see how now it's more clear that that dot we were talking about, the linear, the outlier, and it's a coordinate 1, I think it's 154, right? It looks like it's 154. The person was 1 day absent, it's right there, and they got a 54. Okay, so there's the outlier. It's a little more clear. Now, what's also interesting is we stored the linear regression. So if you hit the y equals button, go to the top left of your calculator, hit y equal. Your equation's also written nice and cushy for you there. So if you didn't like the way I wrote the equation before and you wanted to find out what to write on your test paper, just hit the y equal button. We stored it there. There it is. It's y equal negative 2.18x plus 78.75. It's right there. Okay. So if you go to graph again, that's also there, no problem. And that's it. That's how you use your graphing display calculator to calculate linear regression. To answer the question about the outlier, there it is, 154. This data point is different from the others in the trend because a student with a good attendance got a low mark. That's all that is, okay? All right, guys, we'll see you next class. Take care.